Here with everything you need to know about tax season 2022 is Dan Geltrude, managing partner at Geltrude & Co. Dan, what advice do you like to give taxpayers as they're preparing to file?
Well, some of this is really common sense. Let's start with this. If you know that you're going to get a refund, file right away. There's no need to have the government holding your money any longer than absolutely necessary. On the other hand, if you're going to owe, you want to wait, hold out until you're right at that April 18th deadline to get that tax return filed. Now, at the same time, going back to if you're getting a refund, as you alluded to before, there are delays out there. So one thing that you want to do is make sure that you file electronically. Filing by paper is only going to delay things. Why? Because the IRS then has to manually input your tax return. So you want to get your tax return into the system as quickly as possible. And finally, you're also going to want to direct that refund to be a direct deposit. Again, why wait for a check? Get away from paper as much as you can. Have that refund going directly into your bank account.
Speaking of the delays, right, we know the IRS still sorting out, tens of millions, it seems like, unprocessed returns from last year. To that end, how is this going to impact the backlog when people try to get their returns in this year? And what kind of backlog are we talking about here in terms of a timeline?
So the last information that I've seen related to the IRS backlog was right at the end of 2021, and they were behind by about 6 million tax returns. And we're talking about 6 million tax returns not being processed. That's about 1 million more behind than they were from the prior year. So again, that creates this jam up in the system because the IRS is trying to get caught up from last year, and then they're moving into the tax season now and having to process new tax returns coming in from 2021. Now, the IRS is saying that even though there's a lot going on there, that refunds should take about 21 days, 3 weeks, give or take. That's pretty good if they can keep that pace. However, if you want to know what's going on with your refund, you can go to the IRS's website and look at the tab that says, "Where's my refund?" After about 24 hours of filing your tax return electronically, your tax return hits the system and you could actually follow the status as to where you are.
All right, great insight there. We mentioned, obviously, delays, but also complications. So on the complication front, there are a lot of COVID-related changes to the tax season this year, right? We're talking stimulus checks, child tax credits, even unemployment benefits. How can taxpayers kind of best navigate all of these changes?
Well, the best way to do that is make sure that you hire a competent professional to take care of these things for you. Because if you try to take this stuff on your own and you're not a seasoned tax preparer, well, there's a greater opportunity to make mistakes. For example, realize this: unemployment benefits, although in the prior year were not taxable, you know what? They're taxable this year. So if you weren't preparing for that, you may be in for a little bit of a surprise related to perhaps a refund you thought you were getting turns into you actually owe. When we talk about stimulus checks, there are some people that should have received their stimulus checks and they haven't yet. So there is a recovery rebate credit on your tax return that you can fill out in order to get credit for what you didn't get via a stimulus check. Now, the final thing I just want to highlight here is the child tax credit. Remember, that was increased and people were actually getting checks. The remainder of the balance that you would be due from the federal government, well, that needs to be filled out on your tax return and also taking into consideration what you've already received from the federal government by check. So these things you need to be aware of because it's easy to make a very simple mistake and it costs you.
Speaking of mistakes here, what are kind of the most common mistakes when it comes to filing taxes, and how can they be avoided? And I'm thinking in particular of like the millennials, these younger Americans who might not have experience with this process. And I'm glad you brought up a moment ago, hiring a competent professional, because I remember in my early 20s, I thought I was saving a few bucks on doing it on my own with the online tax preparation system. It cost me like $4,000 because I made some mistakes in that, and I learned the hard way not to do that. But beyond that, what's advice that you have for kind of these younger preparers and avoiding some of these pitfalls?
So people that are going to take this challenge on themselves and try to file their own tax return, a lot of the common mistakes that are made are things that really aren't that complex. For example, making sure that your Social Security number is correct. That's what drives everything in the tax return filing process. Everything goes by your Social Security number. If you're just one digit off, it throws everything off. People also make mistakes related to having the incorrect filing status, filing single, filing married, head of household, those types of things. Also, it's very easy to put numbers on the wrong lines, making sure that you're declaring all your income and also taking advantage of all the deductions and credits that you're due. So again, understanding how to navigate each line of the tax return. And finally, another thing is incomplete information. Sometimes people don't realize they're missing a 1099 or some other piece of information. They file their tax return without taking everything into consideration. What happens, it's an incomplete tax return. Now you're getting a notice from the IRS, and again, it just slows down the process.
Such great advice there, and I am a proponent of getting a professional to kind of do it for you, because to the point that I noted a moment ago, I think I saved $100 not having a professional do it, and then it cost me thousands of dollars, mostly on penalties, for the errors that I made. So really great advice. Dan, always glad to have you on. Dan Geltrude, managing partner at Geltrude & Co.